Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to see we're already 100 people here. Wait, now the waiting room has come back. There we go. Welcome, everyone. So we are here to have a conversation with Dr. Bradley Lane today. We have some questions that we're going to be asking him, but we thought we'd start out with a poll to get to know some things about Bradley, or to give you the opportunity to guess some things about him. So let me put up a poll here.
Do I get to participate in the poll?
That's cheating. No, you get to give us the answers.
I guess now is when the music should be playing while you're working on the poll questions.
So, and don't think too hard, because we're going to get to the answers, and that's the most fun part. So first instincts. And there are 4 questions, if I'm not mistaken. So keep scrolling.
I'd need to hear him sing first.
That might be a hint. That might give something away. And there is no prize at the end, so don't have too much anxiety. It's all just for fun.
It's interesting to see the responses come in live as well, to know particularly how I am perceived by people who may not know me well.
All right.
Yeah, that's the scary thing.
I think, yeah,
We're basing these.
we're going to end the poll, and I'm going to actually introduce Dr. Lane Bradley. Bradley Lane, sorry. Why don't you tell us the answers of these things? Because everyone's done their best job here.
Oh yeah, and I'm so pleased to get to meet so many of you at once too. So let's go through these. Which of the following things is true? The winning answer actually is the second item. I have been in a Broadway musical. It's a funny story. What I actually have said is that I have appeared live on stage in a Broadway musical, which is true. Because one of the last times that I went to Broadway, I love going to New York and I love seeing theater. And there was a musical a couple years ago where you could buy seats, and the seats were actually on the stage and you were worked into the production. So that is how that happened. I was not in the cast, although, you know, maybe I should have been by the time the night was over. But that is how that worked. What kind of pets do I live with? Oh, interesting here, interesting. Well, the correct answer is I have a black cat. Her name is Nico. She's named for a singer that I really love called Nico Case, who it turns out was named for the Japanese word for cat. And in a roundabout way, I named my cat Cat, which I did not anticipate doing, but I suppose that is better than having a dog named Cat. And if you're on a lot of Zooms with me, you will often see her make an appearance. Like, she's sleeping right now in a chair by the window, but she will come over at a certain point for sure. She's very sociable and takes working at the college just as seriously as I do. So she's going to show up. What can I brag about? I've been to all 50 states. I've lived near Tina Turner. I collect cookbooks. The answer actually is also all of the above. I was born in very rural Western Tennessee, not far at all from where Tina Turner's birthplace is in Nutbush. She's just right down the road from me. And I have also been to all 50 states, and I do collect cookbooks, and that will come up again probably in a later question that they ask me to. If you were to turn on the radio, what kinds of music would be playing? You kind of got the hint because Shaka Khan, Rufus and Shaka Khan was playing at the start. It is 70s and 80s, R&B especially, but also dance. I love disco and post-disco dance music from the 70s and 80s, by far the best. So that I collect records in addition to collecting cookbooks. And so yeah, the Shaka Khan was very appropriate in one of my theme songs this summer. So those are really fun questions.
Excellent, excellent. It's really great to get a good overview really quickly this way.
Yeah.
I'm going to start out with some basics. What would you like to be called and what pronouns do you prefer?
Sure. Please call me Bradley. And I use he, him, his pronouns. It just winds up, Dr. Lane always seems really, really official to me. And I know there are opportunities when we use it, but I would prefer that most people address me as Bradley. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bradley. So it's been a pretty long 18 months since our lives have been profoundly changed by the pandemic. How have you managed these last 18 months?
Self-care is really huge. And I have heard other people talk about some of the things that they have done for self-care too. And I don't know about you all, but I have had a range of kind of pandemic hobbies. One, like everyone, I started baking at the start of the pandemic, and I'm still working on perfecting my biscuits. As a native Southerner, I do love a really good biscuit, and I have been trying all kinds of different flours and mixes to try to get the right kind of consistency. So that's an ongoing fascination. I spent too much time on eBay buying things. That was something that I did. I've been buying about a lot of records and on eBay, as well as some really cool posters, some rock posters. But that was one of the strategies. I did yoga at home almost every day for the 14 or so months in Seattle that I was working from home. That has been huge. And in Seattle, I wound up living really close to a park that had old growth forest, and I would go for walks in that park. When I couldn't do other things, and that felt really grounding and wonderful. And I'm looking forward to kind of figuring out where my nature destinations are here. I have gone hiking one weekend up in Malibu in the canyons that was really pretty, and I want to find some other hiking destinations and other kinds of outdoor resources, because that's been huge for me as well. So those were some of my strategies. Oh, and I also watched everything on Netflix. Probably everything.
Nice. And by biscuits, you're thinking savory biscuits. I'm just clarifying.
It is true. If you had asked the question savory versus sweet, I would have picked savory. Yeah. I am a savory fan for breakfast and brunch. And yeah, these biscuits are savory for sure.
All right. Perfect.
Oh, and I love in the chat, people are giving me really good hiking choices like Topanga. Topanga is beautiful. I have been to Topanga a couple times, and I would love to check that out. I love all of these. Yeah, I love all these ideas. And also congrats to the people who won the quiz at the start. Several people are boasting. So
I'm going to second what Dagmar wrote about the annual Pastoral Rogers State Park and the Backbone Trail.
That's great.
That one regularly. And there's all trails. So you come to us from Seattle Central College, where you received, when you received a letter to join SMC. What were your first thoughts when you received that letter? It
was, I have to say, it was really a dream come true when I received that letter. Santa Monica College had been sort of on my radar for a while, just because you all have a national reputation. And I can remember when I saw the job announcement for the vice president of academic affairs position. And like a lot of decisions I have made in the past, I sort of will just be, well, I'll apply. It's not like they'll pick me. That's kind of what I did with grad school too. When I applied for my doctoral program, it's like, well, I'll apply, but I won't get in. And so I didn't have to worry about that until it did happen. And I was just personally feeling in Seattle, because I like doing urban kinds of education, and have really, as a high school teacher and middle school teacher, taught in urban environments and really loved working in the Seattle urban space. I was trying to figure out what are other places where I can get different kinds of experiences in urban environments, working with multicultural student populations. I also was coming from a district of 3 colleges, and I was excited to say, it would be fun to work at a college that was a single college instead of a multiple district. And so there were things about the opportunity I thought was really cool. And I was so impressed by the reputation. And then once I kind of got into the search process, everyone was really fantastic. And I saw the commitment to students come through like every single conversation that I had with people. And I saw the commitment around equity really rising to the fore. And that's a huge match with my own values. And so it felt like this wonderful, perfect dream come true opportunity. And I was also excited to have a little more warm weather and sunshine. And so all of those, because Seattle's lovely like 3 months of the year. But I wanted a little more than that. So it was like a dream come true. I don't know that I could have done it at the very start of the pandemic, kind of uprooted everything and moved to a new institution. The fact that we were starting to come back made me feel more equipped to meet people and form relationships, which I think is really at the heart of being successful in these kinds of positions. And I knew that I wanted to be able to come into the office and work and meet people and be around people. And so given where we kind of are in the trajectory of the pandemic, knowing that I could do some of that also made it feel more feasible. I don't know that I could have changed colleges and worked remotely in a brand new college for a year. There are people who are doing that here now, and I really marvel at that because that I know is really, really tough.
Yeah, that would be really, really tough. So you've dropped a few little hints about some things about you, like being born in a small town in Tennessee. We know you've been to Seattle. Now you're in Santa Monica. What are some of these big milestones that's made you move all over the place?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So like some of our students, I'm a first generation college student. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I was the first person to move away anywhere. I wound up going to college because I had teachers in high school who saw the potential in me and said, you're going to go to college. And just like I had professors in college who similarly said, no, you're going to go to grad school and you could be a professor. And I think more than anything, I kind of recognize the ability of teachers to see that horizon of possibility being wider than I think it is, and letting other people see the opportunities for yourself that you may not have might have on your own. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to be a teacher. And pretty much always, whether I was teaching middle school or high school or college, have really wanted to have that sense of education. Paulo Freire says that education is the practice of freedom, and Toni Morrison says that the function of freedom is to free somebody else. And those are really some of the statements that kind of organize my career and my thinking. And so I've always just been really drawn to want to see as much of the world as I can and experience as many things and as many different people as I can. And that's kind of what led me each stage of the way. I moved from my really small town where I was from in Tennessee after I did undergrad at the closest college there was, and then they gave me like the fullest scholarship that they could. And then I moved to the closest big town and worked there for a while, and then kind of, moved on and on and on. I would say it was really fantastic getting to work at Vanderbilt, where I was a master's student in a program where we were working with academically advanced prospective middle school and high school students, especially from historically underserved backgrounds, and giving them experiences in the summer on campus at Vanderbilt. I did that for 2.5 years, getting them more accustomed to the idea of college going. And that to me was a really amazing experience. And when I moved to Indiana to do more graduate work, I also worked for Upward Bound in Indiana and Bloomington, where I was, and in Indianapolis, both. Again, working with prospective college going populations, especially from historically underserved backgrounds. And that work too, I was always kind of driven by what were the opportunities. I started teaching in community colleges when I was finishing my PhD, because there was a community college down the road, and like a lot of graduate students, I was trying to come up with money aside from my assistantship. And when I started teaching at Ivy Tech as a part-time faculty member, I had a lot of my preconceived notions about community colleges challenged, because I had never gone to community college, although a lot of my friends and neighbors had. And I also found for my own teaching that I was trying to grapple with, did I want to be a high school teacher, which I had done? Did I want to teach college? And especially in places where there were a lot of dual enrollment programs, like in Indiana and like in Washington, where I worked, I realized I didn't really have to choose if I went the direction of the community college, that I could get dual enrollment students. I could get students in my class from a whole variety of backgrounds who were working really, really hard to be there. And I also compared a little bit the teaching that I did in community college to the teaching that I did at Indiana University Bloomington in my program. And it just didn't compare in terms of how exciting the classroom space was when everyone wasn't sort of like 19 years old and maybe hungover from a frat party, but instead was coming from a million different places and many different age groups, many different life experiences, maybe would not ordinarily talk to one another in real life, and certainly not encounter each other as peers, in an environment where they have to learn from and listen to each other. And it felt amazing. And it felt, increasing, like as an administrator in community colleges, it feels like one of the honestly last democratic institutions that exist in the country, and fiercely worth protecting, and probably something that wouldn't get started today the same way. And that just the real specialness of that made me realize, when I went on the job market, I only wanted to go on the job market in community colleges. And so that's what I did. At the time that I was finishing up my PhD, I had a partner, and he got a job at the University of Washington as a faculty member. And I was just going to kind of write my dissertation and kind of go wherever we landed. And I found work super fast, a tenure track faculty position in a Washington community college, and didn't really ever look back. And it was remarkable and totally enjoyable. And it's the thing that I have kind of devoted myself to ever since.
Nice, nice. So what inspires you in the classroom, and from like a teaching and learning perspective?
I've kind of referenced this in some other conversations too, but I guess to get really technical about it for a second, I am what you would call a constructivist, in the sense that I think that we learn things together that we don't necessarily learn on our own. And I always want to set that classroom up, and I love seeing the classroom set up in such ways that it's clear we are constructing and co-constructing understanding together. So I love active kinds of learning. I love seeing students be able to reflect metacognitively on their learning, and that only comes kind of with time, having had the opportunity to represent their understanding, having the right kind of materials that have documented their learning that they can then reflect on. But the added expertise and the deepening of that understanding. I love interdisciplinary kinds of learning. Both of my graduate degrees are interdisciplinary, and the thing that has been really cool about that is you really sort of ask a question and then you go wherever the answers to the question might be. You are not necessarily bound by some disciplinary boundaries that are not, that could be more artificial when it comes time to finding the answers to really complicated questions. As a person who is fundamentally the most trained in the humanities, although some of my training is also in the social sciences, I really take into account some of the things that the National Endowment for the Humanities has been saying recently about, what does learning look like in the 21st century? And it is interdisciplinary, it is problem-based, it's inquiry-driven. Those are the kinds of learning that really excite me as an instructor, and that have really excited me as a student. And I want to help people develop those kinds of environments. And it has meant, it's often meant having the kind of classroom that I didn't necessarily have as a student, which was fairly traditional. It has often meant having, for me as a teacher, to kind of reconceive of myself as like, I am not necessarily the one who is talking the most, and not everything needs to get through me in order to have happen, but becomes really, really beautiful. There was a book that I read a couple of years ago as part of a faculty learning community that we were doing at my college called Teaching with Your Mouth Shut, which sounded like really bizarre, but the idea was like, can you really, as an instructor, step into more of that facilitative role? And what happens when you do? Because that activated some of my anxieties. But one of the beautiful things I've learned both about teaching and about being an administrator is, like, a lot of times when you step back, really, really good stuff happens, and you do not actually have to control it all. And that's been a huge, wonderful learning environment, like learning lesson for me, both as a teacher and an administrator.
I love that, teaching with your mouth shut. That makes me very happy. I know you have a personal commitment to equity. How did you get interested in educational equity?
It actually, I can boil it down. There's a very specific moment. I was an undergraduate English major, and I took probably every single class that the English department offered by the time I was done. And one of my favorite professors in undergrad was teaching a women writers class. And it was really the first time that I had been introduced to a kind of theory, wound up being feminist theory, that I found as a, just as an individual, to be really salient for analyzing the way that the world worked and for analyzing some of my own experiences with gender and sexuality. And it totally kind of opened up for me, like what I thought graduate school could become. I remember at the time, this was the sort of avant-garde professor, the kind of wild, fun, interesting professor in my department. And she was not my advisor. My advisor was like the chair, and he was old and stodgy and a dear man, and I really love him, but he was old and stodgy. And he kept giving me flack, like, why are you taking a class in women writers? That's not even a topic. And I would have to kind of go back to him and say, like, that's because like every other class is like men, like white men. And so, what's going on? And that sort of led me, especially with feminist theory, to do a grad certificate in my master's degree in feminist theory, and then to pursue a PhD at the Kinsey Institute in Indiana, where I was working in their archives and doing the first doctoral program in gender studies in the nation in the early 2000s. And at Vanderbilt and at Indiana both, that work became much more intersectional, and I began to read and learn more, especially about critical race theory and women of color feminism and queer of color critique inside of gender and sexuality studies. And so that developed my understanding, as well as the kind of teaching that I was doing. And I wound up getting a faculty job in an English department. Although neither of my grad degrees was in English, I had experience being a middle school and high school English teacher, and I had certified to teach English, and I could look and talk a lot like an English teacher. And I even then had some of my preconceptions challenged, because one of the reasons that the college in Seattle hired me was that they wanted someone to teach women and gender studies. And here I was in many ways thinking like, oh, often there aren't community colleges that have programs in women's and gender studies. When in reality, these are students who actually need feminist theory a lot, and need queer theory and need critical race theory a lot, because it speaks to their direct experiences, in ways that often those become sort of more rarefied topics at research institutions, whereas there was the opportunity to engage in like real praxis, and kind of put your money where your mouth is and where your politics might be. And that just was so thrilling and exciting. And then as an administrator, where that work has been valuable to me, particularly as I step outside the classroom, and I miss teaching a whole lot. But what I really loved as a dean, when I was a dean, was getting to have conversations with faculty around teaching and learning, and often be able to engage in hiring and in program development and curriculum development, and be able to build teams of people who had that kind of equity mindset and also had that skill set to kind of move the institution forward. And then as a vice president, what I have found is I get to be in an institutional position where I can bring resources to things that really matter. And so that has been where I get kind of that joy from, to see what happens then when you can start to kind of create more structural change and structural kinds of processes, knowing that you have those kinds of commitments to equity and the institution does. And so what does it really mean to lead that way? That has felt really exciting and joyful, and a privilege, that I can't remember who said it, but there sort of is this adage, like, never give power to someone who really wants it. And I